Hi, Stan.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for taking the time today.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for coming to my show.
You're more than welcome.
So I've gone through a profile. I've seen that you started your career as a hairdresser in 1990.
Yeah.
Now you are into Amazon Web Services, working as a advocate. So I thought
Yeah.
to tell about your
Sure.
experience and how you started everything,
Absolutely.
how you worked in network thing and everything.
Sure. Okay.
So before that, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Stuart Clark. I'm a senior developer advocate with AWS. I run the community partner engagement. So I work with different partners at AWS and their developer advocacy teams to create content which aligns to cloud computing and technologies which are, wrapped around, included in open source and products which are, used within AWS environments.
And you're from?
I'm from England, so I live in a little city called Lincoln, which is on the East Midlands of England.
So before coming to AWS, I can see you have worked in Cisco for long time as a network specialist.
Yeah, I started at Cisco in 2012 as a contractor. It was only for meant to be for 12 weeks, and I ended up staying there for just over 10 years.
And how you started this? Because you was doing a non-technical job before I was born. It was 1990.
Sure, my age there, buddy. Yeah, so I left school at 16, which is pretty normal in the UK to leave school at 16. Um, I'd already started working part time when I was 14, just after school, just to earn some pocket money, just to buy sneakers and, skateboards and things that you do when you're a kid. And I did an apprenticeship in hairdressing from the age of 16 to 19, 3-year apprenticeship. And then once I became a qualified hairdresser, I then moved around the UK and to America and to New Zealand, just to work in different hair salons, just cutting hair. I did a number of years in London, working in Mayfair, and then I finished my career. I did the last lot of 3.5 years in the city of Nottingham in England. So yeah, it was a big change going from cutting hair to being in IT.
And what's your motivation to come into IT? Who said that? What is your inspiration?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the time, the little village that we lived in, we'd just started getting broadband or fast internet, and they'd started laying fibre within the streets. And so this was the first time I'd ever lived in a house and had the internet. Internet was at that stage in rural locations was just mainly provided in businesses. So, the only thing I'd really done online was just, create an email address. That's the only thing I'd ever done. And so when we moved into this property, we got the internet enabled, and I went down to, local store and bought my first wireless router. And so fitting that router, that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. They did the termination into the house, and then, you plug your Cat5 cable into it. And then I just followed the instructions to set up the router. And then I bought a printer, and that was a wireless printer. So I networked that onto there. And then I set up another machine, which was just a laptop. So I set up a small, wireless network within our house. And then I was speaking with my next door neighbor, and he asked me if I would help him fit a router. He'd bought one, but he didn't know how to fit it. So I went and fitted his router, and then I did the house next door to that, and then the one in the street. And then, by the time I'd finished, I'd probably set up 10 little small, Netgear or Belkin routers. And that was the first time I started playing, with things like TCP/IP, wireless configurations, adding devices onto the network, and adding things like static IPs as well. That became, and doing things like port forwarding as well. So that's really, really where it all started.
And you worked there for how many years?
Mm. Well, that was just at my house. And then when I looked to do a change into IT, I took my CCNA. So that was the first certification that I took. But while I was doing that, I was still, very much cutting hair, being a hairdresser for, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week.
And how is working for network and doing network engineering?
It's really, really interesting. The first thing that when you go out from being in a customer services environment, I think that really helps. Interacting with people on a very personal basis every day really helps. My first job was in network operations center. So, answering a lot of phones and taking a lot of queries from customers and helping troubleshoot their problems. So having good communication skills and being able to listen, empathize with the customer, and provide regular feedback and updates for them becomes kind of very important, when you're working so closely with customers in that area. So that was the kind of the biggest change for me.
Now coming with that huge experience working in AWS. So how is this?
It's much the same. So as doing, going from network engineer to network automation engineer, and then doing developer advocacy for network engineers. As network engineering has progressed, network engineering has followed a very similar process to what, say, SRE has or DevOps has, becoming very agile, using a lot of different tooling, which wasn't commonly used in, network engineering, say, 10 years ago. So moving those skills into the cloud, it's very, very similar, has a lot of synergy between the two things. As a developer advocate, your main focus is engagement and looking to provide content and show real world examples to help other people grow their skills, whether that's the latest and greatest things, which say AWS is coming out with a new service, for example, or an open source tool which might work with AWS, or really then showing people, the best ways to get the most best practices out of something like a CI/CD pipeline. There's a big synergy between those things. I think it's important to realize with your career is that no matter what you're doing now, you will always lift a percentage of that up to 25 to 30% of the current skills that you have. You will take them to your new job. So as a developer advocate, being able to create clear documentation, clear content, and understand and have your kind of finger on the pulse of what developers are working with and the things that they're troubleshooting will create the interest and will help other developers look and say, that's something I'm going to be interested in reading about, keeping everything current.
And what is exciting you in your present job?
What is exciting me? What excites me at the minute with the current job is I get to work with a very wide spectrum of people. And a lot of the different AWS partners that I work with are in different stages of their journey with AWS. So some are startup companies, some are new partners who are joining onto AWS or Amazon Marketplace or the Amazon AWS Partner Network. So I see a variety of customers. So it's not just the big customers or the big partners that I'm working with, like the likes of MongoDB or HashiCorp or Red Hat or something. I get to work with smaller companies as well and really see what they're developing and how they're helping developers with their everyday workflows.
So how many services you know personally?
With AWS, I would say probably about 5 or 6. I'm still very new to AWS, so I'm still learning a lot of the things that go with it. A lot of the stuff that I did with AWS previously before starting with them was just using it within my everyday kind of workflows, setting up things like EC2 or S3 or IAM. for example, or VPC, just simple services to coincide with things which you're using like on-prem, or using it in demos, because it becomes easily accessible to have the cloud instead of having to poke holes in a firewall for a data center, for example. So my skills with AWS are just constantly evolving and just constantly growing. But I tend to stick with the things like Lambda, S3, EC2, VPC, for example, IAM things. More recently, I've started to look at things like SageMaker as well, to start looking at how machine learning can be complemented into the things that I'm doing. And you just kind of think about it like a building blocks. You will start with one thing, and then you add another piece on, and then another service on, and then you're starting to build that entire picture. So it's a learning in progress at the minute.
And you are the evidence for the evolution of technology from past 20 or 30 years. You saw how things changed in technology. So how this technology network is helping or solving the problems of human network?
I think as the cloud started to take a big chunk of things, where people have moved from having things on-prem, there was always a big shift where, to start with, the way that I saw the cloud was that it was the smaller companies, the agile companies, who were leaving the on-prem to move into the cloud. The slow adopters tended to be, from what I saw, with the things like people within financial technologies who had very, very tight procedures and governance around things. But we've started to see that shift of where more fintech is moving things into the cloud. Companies are starting to embrace that. There's always going to be a big kind of rush to market where, a lot of things get put in the cloud and then they get taken back out the cloud. Really, the way that it's kind of evolved is, we saw a lot of things get migrated into the cloud, and then things get kind of split as hybrid as well. So there's still the combination now of both cloud and on-prem, which really kind of complements each other. The tricky part to that is, for a developer, is being able to develop the workflows and the things like pipelines to work then between both on-prem and cloud. That's where you're starting to see that big skill set driver now come in, being able to build those, say a CI/CD pipeline, or something like event-driven notification, to work both within a cloud environment and an on-prem data center environment.
And what you are learning from the present job?
Right now, there's a huge amount of learning to be done. So working with different partners, even like from everything from, say, Vercel. So I learned a lot about kind of front end and back end with Vercel and Next.js recently, which was really interesting. Did a whole bunch of work with Cisco, who build secure CI/CD platforms to integrate, to look for where there's security flaws or vulnerabilities within pipelines, for example. Then I've started doing some work with Datadog around how we can do event-driven notification within workflows as well, which has been a huge interest to me for many years, monitoring global networks with thousands of devices, how to aggregate things like monitoring and other things, dependencies like such as applications, is really interesting, because that kind of visibility for me I didn't always have within networking, and now there's certainly tools within AWS which allow that. And there's, also huge amounts of third-party tools, and again, open source tools, which allow you to be able to monitor those things. So that's the thing that I'm learning at the minute. That's the big one at the minute.
So how your previous jobs are helping you in your present job?
There's always something that you're gonna carry over. One of those things is being able to communicate with people, and being able to network with people, being able to explain things clearly to different people, different audiences. I speak with a lot of people, different levels, everything from developers to senior developers, managers, architects, even VPs of corporations being able to talk with many different people at different levels, sometimes at the same time or sometimes one-to-one. So communication is always key. The biggest thing that I've always carried over is empathy, working with people, understanding where their challenges are, understanding where their blockers are, and being able to help. Sometimes, I don't know the answers. Sometimes sometimes I might not even understand the question. So it's breaking things down and understanding where customer and client and partner challenges lie, and then being able to be the conduit between yourselves and engineering or somebody else within the organization, being able to connect those people together to help them solve what could be a critical issue, critical outage, or, down to a bug or something which needs to be, built into a feature or a roadmap. There's a lot of skills which I took from networking, from the tool side as well, things like open telemetry, and again, things like GitLab or GitHub, and GitHub Actions is, a good example of that, and how you can use that in your cloud workflows to orchestrate things when you're spinning things up, within EC2 or something like that, and you're wanting to build resources. So there's a lot of things which, you can carry over between, or I have carried over between past jobs and what I'm doing now. Certainly there. I write a lot of documentation as well. As part of my job, I have to write a lot of documents, supporting documents for customers, documents for partners as well, and especially around the program side. So having kind of the ability to create good documentation which others can follow, so that they can be part of your project, is just, you're just taking those skills with you and using them as you advance your career.
And right now, in your present job, what kind of projects you work for?
So right now, what I do with AWS, I work very closely with the partners. I lead a program to work with AWS developers. So there's people within the AWS heroes, AWS builders, AWS community, and then partners of AWS. I work with them to engage their partners. So, we have a partner, and we have a very similar synergy between what AWS does and also what our partners do. And so, you might have somebody within the AWS community who isn't as familiar with, someone like Cycode or Datadog or Vercel. And then you might have somebody in one of those communities who isn't as familiar with how something like a product like Datadog or Vercel might work with AWS. So I work with the partners to kind of create a best of both worlds scenario where we're connecting developers from AWS and connecting developers from our partners together to show the power of using AWS Cloud and our partners' technologies. It's very developer focused. So it's very, very hands-on, very, very visual as well. People can learn a lot from what we're showing, from both how the partner product integrates and works on top of AWS and why it works so well on AWS, to how AWS services are working behind the scenes to integrate with the partner product.
So can I say, in your previous work experiences, you was very much into talking with machines and lifeless things. Right now, you're communicating with human beings.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you're right. So as a part of, being an advocate, you need to understand people and you need to understand technology at the same time. Anytime you can humanize things, make something that's more understandable and explain something to, how something works to someone, is going to be advantageous. Yourself and others you'll know people who are extremely technical, way more technical than I am, who are fantastic, very good sources of knowledge, but sometimes they might have a problem explaining that to another person. And this is where, as an advocate, being able to communicate quite clearly, articulate what's going on and walk someone through that process step by step, and then have to take a step back sometimes and then kind of rev on that to help a partner or customer or, just an end client understand what that roadmap looks like is quite critical.
What are your that core qualities that are making you to solve the problems that you're getting?
One of the core qualities is always listening. It's very, very easy to want to explain something very, very quickly, but without taking in all of the facts to start with. So understanding what's going on and why there's a need for that. And that can be anything from a customer problem or a partner problem. Somebody in the community perhaps has a problem, but it might also be a BU or an organization internally to a company, and they want to explore reaching a certain type of developer and they're unsure how to do that. Or they're writing technical documentation, such as, something around how an API works, and they want to understand the best practices for documenting how an API works, how they can create a feedback loop between their customers and their partners. So it kind of varies from day to day, and also from kind of, week to week of which particular, audience you're working with. But in order to do those, you have to have that fundamental, what is it that they actually want to deliver and what is it that they're trying to achieve? That becomes the critical goal.
So clients or the customers with non-technical problems, coming with a non-technical background, you coming and solving their problems by giving the technology services that you have, and matching the requirements of the client with non-technical problems with technology services. So how is this? How it is? How you're making it easy?
There's a lot of things that you can do to make it easy for them. You can provide them with step-by-step workflow documentation of how, how to solve this particular problem. You can point them to things like code examples. It depends how much of involvement, that you're going to have with that particular customer, that particular client. For sometimes what they want to do is, they want to do it themselves. And so that, you have to start them maybe sometimes at day zero. Then that's the point of how much knowledge do they already have within that particular area? Is this completely new to them? So this is the part where you're understanding, the position or their starting point, because everybody starts at different points and different periods. So you start with them, at day one, and you look at the challenges that they're potentially looking to solve. The idea being is that when you're trying to solve those problems or trying to get to, an end of a project with customer or client, you don't start with the big elephant-sized problems to start with, something that's humongous. Start with the kind of the smaller problems to start with, and then slowly build that up into and growing that into a wider sort of, mechanism or wider program. So, to start with, if you're doing something like say, for example, with streaming telemetry, you look and see to the client and you perhaps ask them, what are the most critical, important things that you want to know about? And then you start working on that problem. So they might be looking at, for example, they might be looking at things like trying to work out when there's high utilization and they need to have more resources. How do they monitor that? How do they alert people? And then how do they get more resources built within that particular side of the infrastructure or that side of the cloud? How do they scale that up? How and when do they know how to do that? So you start to work through the kind of the low hanging fruit type things, and then you build that up into a whole workflow and series. There's a lot of uplifting in there with knowledge transfer, and so some things are done in a morning, some things are done over a day, and some things are done over a number of days, consecutively. You're back with that on that every day until you've reached the end goal. And then the customer is then able to add more services they need, and they're able to build on top of this as they're going along. And then, the only time you have any further interaction with them is perhaps when they get blocked or stuck, and, they need a feature in a technology which isn't particularly there, and you have to build a lot of things like custom workarounds or something to get that fixed.
So what is your approach to find solution for any problem that you face?
I don't disregard anything. Sometimes it's a case of trial and error with a lot of things. So, take something very fundamental. For example, if you were new to automation, somebody might say, should I use Python or should I use Ansible? The simple answer is yes. Go which one you want to go with. You might start working in Python and you might really, this might solve your problem, and this might be the language for you. Or you might get midway down into your workflow and realize this isn't working. We need to switch to Ansible. There's a number of times where you will lift things out of your project and put new services in because they might not scale. They might not give you the right results. There's different reasons for, switching different technologies out at a time. That's, the whole true meaning of, using, like the DevOps mentality of lifting those, bits and pieces in and out all the time and different tools. So just, start with the very, very basics and then just work your way, forward with those. There's always going to be huge amounts of trial and error, and that's okay, because not everything works first time. And I've always found that you learn the most when you're making the most mistakes. And so don't treat it as a disaster and this is going wrong. Just treat it as a learning experience. All you've done is found a way that it doesn't work. So then you move on and you try again, and maybe that doesn't work. That's okay. Just mark it down and say, okay, we've tried this way. It doesn't work. And then you try, perhaps version number 3, version number 4, number 5. Doesn't matter how many versions you do. At the end of the day, you're working towards solving a complex problem. Sometimes as more as complex as things get, the more times it will take you to try it. Something doesn't always work first time.
A hairdresser in you and a network engineer, network administrator in you, now a developer advocate. So how this hairdresser and also network engineer are those two persons in you are helping to solve problems in you who is a developer advocate?
Yeah, so I can always give people hair advice if they want it. That's cool. But it was working with people, understanding people's problems and listening to people's problems, which has helped me be a developer advocate. From network engineering, I was fortunate enough to work on some very, very large networks and build automation from scratch. So 2 of the networks that I worked on for Cisco were 2 of Cisco's largest global networks. And I was able to do automation on both of those, right from, day zero, building automation out from just adding simple firewall rules from Ansible to being able to do complete deployments of new data centers and new services and technologies within there with automation, which is advantageous for the business. Understanding how things like quality and assurance work, QA works, and then using automation to be able to solve large outage issues or predictability of outage issues as well. So that gave me a lot of real world experience, being very hands-on. I spent probably close to 10 years of being fully hands-on as an engineer, looking at global outages and building tools and building systems and frameworks and roadmaps and troubleshooting outages. And I'm able to use all of the things that I've learned and all of the tools that I've learned, and then talk about that as a developer advocate. because I've got an engineering background. So I've been in the trenches, I've been in the outages, I've been in the, the early mornings, the late nights, all of the things, typically which engineers go through. So it gives you that huge amount of empathy for people, and you're able to talk to them about their, frustrations and how I alleviated those frustrations in my job, how automation helped me stop having to care about certain things happening because I knew I could automate it.
Is there any problem that you cannot solve?
Oh, plenty. Yeah. There's always plenty of problems. As we were saying before, sometimes you can solve problems in 10 minutes, and sometimes you can solve them in a day. Sometimes, you might wrestle with a particular problem, for a number of weeks before you get to a conclusion, because there's so much you're digging into, so much you're unpacking, and so much you're learning it. Sometimes that's half the fun of being an engineer. Like most engineers, I like solving problems. I like solving puzzles. And so when there's something to jump into and there's something to troubleshoot, and the opportunities to collaborate with, different people from different parts of the world, different teams, that's always really enjoyable as well. So it's always interesting to look for challenges as well, because, you want to keep challenging yourself.
And what is challenging for you, talking with computers or talking with human beings?
I guess sometimes it depends on the day, sometimes it's fun just to sit and build code, and just to be, in the coding zone, to build something fun. But I do miss then, the interaction with people as well. I think there's always the unique thing about being a developer advocate is you have your foot in both both areas at the same time. You're bridging that gap, and you're able to talk about technology and troubleshoot technology while being on the in front of people and being able to solve that with them. And I think sometimes that's the part that I enjoy most about this job.
So how Amazon Web Services is solving problems of human beings around the world?
For me, as coming into this as someone that's relatively new into the cloud, what I found with AWS was this is that within AWS you can build everything that you need to build. From my background, what I found was, from doing network engineering and network automation, was selecting different tools to do different jobs, and finding out which one was best. And then you are having to integrate those tools into services. Sometimes they weren't necessarily designed to work with, say, routers or switches or something, and you're modifying them heavily to be able to work with that. And so you're bringing in a lot of additional tooling. Some of those are open source, or some of those are, ones that, you perhaps buy out of a box. For example, monitoring tools you might buy out of a box. What I found when I started building things within AWS is that everything that I needed to be able to do my job within AWS, I could build within AWS. It was easy to integrate the other platforms and the other tools, simply into AWS. So you might be building, something with VPC, and you need to set permissions through IAM or something, and it's easy to do. You don't need to bring in a third-party device. You can just integrate that simply. And I think for me, that's the best thing about this, is that if you think about the toolbox which I used to use, what we call the Net DevOps toolbox, there was all different tools that were in there, and they'd all been picked off different shelves and put into that toolbox. With AWS, that toolbox is already there for me. It's already predefined, it's already built, and it's already designed to be integrated with all of the other things that I'm doing. So it makes the whole building process and integration process so much more simpler.
And what mindset will help for anybody to work in AWS?
You have to be curious about the tools. It takes, learning something like this for me can take a great deal of vulnerability because it's going to humble you quite quickly because there's a lot of services. Um, so as you're beginning to learn them, just begin to learn things as you start to need them. Don't try to learn everything all at once. Pick the areas that you like, whether that be security or machine learning or networking. Um, Go into those areas and look at the tools around there and how they integrate in to your services and just become more familiar with them. Once you've become familiar with them, say you start with networking within in AWS. Once you've got a good handle on how the networking side within AWS works, start to then look about how you can integrate into that security. For example, how does security integrate into the networking side? And then look to bolt on the areas which will complement the things that you're doing. It's look, when you're always looking to grow your skills or your career, look at things which complement what you're doing now. So if you're doing networking, now the difference between say networking and machine learning, it's possible, but it's a big jump. There's a big bridging gap between the two technologies, for example. So pick something that's perhaps a little bit closer if you want to get to the machine learning side and learn the steps which are along the way.
You worked for large scale companies and you worked for small scale companies. So what is the difference?
Um, the difference within large scale companies like Cisco and AWS within big corporate environments, there's a lot more rigorous things on things like standards around change control. There's a lot more policy because there's a bit more at risk here. There's a lot more things which are at stake, which is the company's brand, the company's reputation, and things like security and governance, which all come along with those. When I first started out in my first job, there was no such thing as on the production network. There was no such thing as things like change requests or change windows. We made changes how whenever we felt like it. Nobody knew who was making what change at any point or given. The only way we knew other people were making changes was essentially by asking them. When I moved into doing networks at UK government level, I then started to get into things like, the request for change procedure, because you're starting to deal with things like municipal services and emergency services like police and fire and hospitals and schools, those kind of things where outages and you need to have high uptime. There's critical services running over a lot of your infrastructure. So you have to be very diligent around your changes, and the changes have to be done within a certain time frame, and they have to be agreed by stakeholders and things. So there's a lot more sort of things like documentation, a lot more things like policy, again, security, governance, rules and regulations which come in within large corporate, environments, which if you haven't dealt with that beforehand, it can seem like a bit of a hurdle. As more and more companies are becoming a lot more things like, DevOps minded and a lot more agile, you need those services to be able to run and deploy those. So there has to be some kind of trade-off between able to, run the services fast as the customers need them, but then also stick within the policies and the guidelines of your company, which is outlined, for that. Each company, each corporate group or each company is going to have different procedures and different policies around that. Some companies are, perhaps a little more stricter in other areas than others. But overall, for somebody like myself who likes writing documentation, for me that really isn't a problem.
And what are your skills?
My skills, I guess, I've spent a lot of time within the root switch world, so I understand a lot of things around root switch, which were, I spent a lot of my beginning. So I guess around TCP/IP, around networking, was fairly large. Then after that, it then starts to be able to do things via code, so you don't have to log into the devices. I've got a fair amount of experience working with APIs, everything from designing APIs to consuming them, whether that's REST or SOAP APIs, working with those different types of coding. So I can work with Ansible, Python, Go are my sort of main sort of languages. On top of that, what else? I think that's pretty much it. They tend to be my kind of main things that I stick to.
And apart from technology, what you do?
Exercise a lot. So, it's get out, do a lot of walking, go to the gym, spend time with family, I think is very important. Spend time with friends. I play guitar as well. I've played guitar since I was 14. So I played guitar for, 30, 34, 35 years now. So I played guitar for a huge amount of time. But yeah, so I split my time from playing guitar, going to the gym, drinking coffee, and, spending time with family.
So concluding your complete work experience, it can be tech or non-technical. So in one sentence, what do you say?
I see adventure, fun, and collaboration.
Do you have a memory that you cannot forget?
Yeah, I do. I was very, very fortunate enough to get the DevNet Expert certification in May last year, which was a huge, huge achievement for me. I worked very heavily on the Cisco DevNet exams for around a year and a half, which was amazing to do, to launch a certification whilst working at Cisco. And then I got to work on the DevNet Expert exam, which was the first new exam that Cisco released in 7 years. And because I worked on the exam and contributed a lot to the exams, I was awarded the DevNet Expert certification, which is, huge achievement.
So I'll put your web links in the description of this video on YouTube. People who find the video on YouTube can see the work that you're doing and can learn from you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And also I'll put on the screen as well, your links, the entire video they can see.
Thank you.
And can you spell it to my podcast listeners?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter as Big Evil Beard. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as Stuart Clark, Stuart, Clark.
And as a developer advocate, as a person who is into network administration, network engineering, as a hairdressing specialist. So what is your observation about my questioning in this conversation and also the work that I'm doing on YouTube?
I think it's brilliant. I think, what you're doing is, you're connecting different people from different backgrounds and sharing their experience. I think what is unique about all of us is we all come from very, very different backgrounds. But anything is achievable. And what you're sharing with your viewers is that no matter what your background is, you just need to follow your passion and you need to just develop new skills.
And I did masters in software engineering, also bachelor's in computer science and engineering.
Wow.
Right now I'm getting trained as a DevOps engineer role, AWS
Cool.
plus DevOps. And how talking with experts like you who are already in the IT industry for a long time, solved different problems and who are from different parts of the world, how this experience collecting from you, knowing, asking questions, how this experience is going to helpful for me if I work in IT in coming days.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing is being able to ask questions, being able to come into conversations as you do wholeheartedly, and showing vulnerability. I think that's very, very important. being able to ask questions and being able to dig into those questions. It can, for a lot of people, that they might not want to do that, but being able to look at the things that you're doing and to be able to evaluate how you can improve on those things will always ultimately help you grow. Sometimes the feedback that, we're given, we might not like it. But the fact is that if that feedback is true, there's nothing that you can do to change that. The only thing that you can change is the way that you react to something. That's the only thing that we have control over. So if somebody says to me, your Python skills, you need to improve them, I could say to them, okay, thank you. I will work on doing that. And I might walk away from that conversation. But as an act of, vulnerability, I might say to that person, what areas do you think I need to improve of my Python skills? Tell me exactly, where you think I need to improve. I think perhaps I work with functions well, or I work with, this particular module within Python. I think I work with that well. And they might say, yes, you work with that well, but you need to work on, say, the readability of your Python code. It's not clear what you're doing. Your intent isn't that clear. So for me, then that becomes a little more, something more focused that I can actually work on, an area which I can improve in. So it's an area then that I can, essentially just look to grow into, because I've got that feedback. I've gone into that conversation further. Hearing that you don't do something well is always going to impact you. But the person giving you that feedback is trying to help you. So you need to go into that feedback to get a bit more out of it. Because I could come away from that conversation and think, I suck at Python. That person is telling me I suck at Python. No, they're not saying I suck at Python. What they're saying is the readability of my Python needs to be improved. That's something that I can work on. I can then work that on my journey, and perhaps I could work with that person, and I could, work on a piece of code and share that back and say, have I improved? Is this improving for me? Are you able to do that? So, having somebody as a mentor is always going to be advantageous if you can find somebody. But pushing, something out there for feedback and just saying to people, look, I'm completely open here. Feedback is feedback. Tell me how you feel. You'll get people who will give you, feedback which doesn't make any sense. You'll get some people who will just say, well, that's good. It's fine for me. But then you'll get some quality feedback. How you react to it, whether you take that feedback on board, that's entirely on you. And that's what will enable you to grow.
Definitely, I'll keep your words in my mind. Also, my viewers also listening to you. Definitely, that helps, and it helps them in their personal development or growth. You'll be the reason for their smile.
I love it.
Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Yeah, absolutely, boss. You go for that.
And also, can I put this audio and video clip on my podcast, website, internet, social
of
media,
course.
everywhere with your permission?
Yeah, no problem.
So thank you, Start, for your valuable time, and thanks for
More than welcome.
inspiring us.
You're more than welcome, buddy. You have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.